and I'm going to just go ahead and introduce our authors. So we've got Erin, who was born in England. After spending years bouncing between Air Force bases in Hawaii, England, and California, her family finally settled down in Utah. When Erin doesn't have her nose in a book, she's busy chasing after her 4 kids, her 2 dogs, and a cat. So we've got a full load there. And Erin's book, Once a King, is out on display here. We've also got Caitlin. She grew up in Northern California and moved to Xinjiang when she was 18. She's been fascinated with how much she doesn't know about the world ever since. She graduated from Brigham Young University with a degree in Asian Studies, and she's the person you avoid at parties because she'll probably start talking about the Shang Dynasty oracle bones. Caitlin lives with her husband and her 4 children in Utah. For more information, we've got all of Caitlin's social media information that we can give you afterwards, and we should have that for everybody as well. And then we've got Tricia. And Tricia recently wrote The Daughter of Bones and then the sequel, The Daughter of the Siren Queen.
Daughter of the Pirate King.
Pirate King. Oh, that's actually a typo on the website. Fix that for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Daughter of Bones sounds cool too. I mean,
Right. She's from a small town in Oregon, but she now lives next to the Rocky Mountains in Utah with her bossy dog, Rosy. She received her degree in the English language and editing, and she's thrilled that she never has to look at textbooks anymore. When she's not writing or reading, Tricia enjoys putting together jigsaw puzzles, playing volleyball, and watching her favorite TV shows while eating extra buttered popcorn. And we'll go ahead and let the panel take everything away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, okay. Thank you guys for coming. I'm Erin, and so I thought what we would do today is we're going to talk a little bit about writing and like kind of the creation of our books, and then if you have questions at the end, like start thinking of them now. We would love to answer any of your questions. For me and Tricia, we both have these standalones, and then Caitlin has written the second book in her series. So I want you guys to tell me about your writing process and how was it different for this book compared to your first or your other books?
That is a great question.
For me at least, well, I have always planned for this to be a series, and so I was always looking forward to writing the next book. Before I even sold the first book to a publisher, I'd already written the second book, which is not a good idea. If you're an author, don't do that. And so after doing all of my edits and writing my first book, I realized that I needed to go a whole lot as an author, and so I completely rewrote this book with hopefully more skill than the first one was. But I think one of the things that's really important, especially when you're writing a series, is it's different because you already have a character cast, your readers are already familiar with the world and with the things that your characters have already overcome, so it's really important in the second book to make sure they continue to grow and that there's a full story arc for a middle book, because there's a third one after it, so that your readers feel like there's still a story that has a start, beginning, middle, and end. But it was a little bit different because the first one is such an introduction, and then the middle, you already have a lot to work with.
Do you want to tell them what your series is
Sure,
about?
I will tell you a little bit about it. It's set in post-apocalyptic China. It's about a girl who, after the world has been taken over by this disease that's actually based on a real disease called encephalitis lethargica, but it's been YA-ified for the book, so it's much scarier than in real life. But the normal one is really terrifying too. It makes you fall into a paralyzed sleep, and then when you wake up, you have psychotic breaks, so you can't control yourself, and you never know when it's going to happen in the book anyway. So she's in a safe place and has medicine for it because she actually has the disease, and then is accused of attempting to murder her best friend and has to decide whether she wants to face charges and probably be executed, or to try to escape where she won't have medicine for this disease that keeps her sane, or to try and face all the people outside.
Very cool. So Warrior of the Wild is about a girl who fails her coming-of-age trial and is banished from her village as a result. And she has to survive in the monster-filled wilderness long enough to kill a god. And this is a standalone, over and done in one book. And writing that is, in some ways, a lot easier than writing a series. You don't have to keep track of all your world building and everything for multiple books, and you don't have to remember what your characters look like, things like that, because it's just going to be over and done. So in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier, but it's also really hard to say goodbye to your characters, I think, after one book. I went from a duology to a standalone, and it was hard to be like, oh, they're all grown up now just after one book. Like, it's just time to say goodbye. So that was a little different compared to writing my first duology. But I liked it, and I'm doing another standalone that's coming out next year, and we'll see, you know?
Yeah, for me, Once a King it's different because it's in the same world as my first two books. So Ever the Hunted was about a girl who has to track down her father's killer, and the person who's accused is the boy that she loves. And Ever the Brave is the sequel to that. So Once a King, there were some characters that I fell in love with in that, in the world of Ever the Hunted, and I kind of explored their story. So it was different because obviously I'm working with new characters, but what I found difficult was kind of pulling in the world that we experienced with Britta and bringing it into the world of the king here. And really quick, Once a King is about a girl who her father runs the criminal underground, and so she does business for him, and so she also runs his criminal activity, and then she meets up with the king and has to work with him. And at the same time, it explores what it means to be a king he's a new king, and he's a king over a kingdom that has a lot of, I would say, like trials and kind of clashing cultures, and what it means to be like a leader. So he grapples with being a good leader and what that means to his people and how to kind of bridge some of the gaps. So let's talk about that for a minute. So that's a theme that I kind of played with Once a King. So one of the inspirations was I was always watching the news when I'm writing. It's kind of like my getaway when I'm writing. If I'm stuck, then I'll go and turn on the news, or I'll flip through my phone and look at news stories. And so I was really struck by let me say this in a nice way, the leadership in the country. And so I started thinking what it meant to be a strong leader and a good leader, or a leader that brings people together. And so that was one of the big inspirations for Once a King. So I want you guys to tell me, like, was there an inspiration for your book, or what did you draw from when you were writing it?
For me, like they said in my introduction, I have a degree in Asian studies, and as I was listening during all of my classes about history and politics, I just couldn't believe that there were things I had never heard about, that I didn't understand about the world that I live in, that so much could have been going on that I'd never been exposed to before. And I have 3 younger sisters who were adopted from China as teenagers, and so as they were trying to learn to read, one of the things that they really struggled with was not just the language, but the fact that so many of our books have references to Western canon. Like, there'll be references to Shakespeare, or to the Bible, or to just our own literature over here that they'd never been exposed to before. And so I wanted to write a book that didn't have so much of that in it, so they'd be able to read it. But another thing in it that I wanted to explore just with the characters themselves is what it's like to be told something your whole life and then to find out that it's not necessarily the only way to look at the world, that there are other people out there who see things differently. And it's not that either side is right, but that there are competing ways to look at things.
That's very good. I've always loved coming-of-age stories, and I like to play with things that I actually struggled with as a teenager, since we write for teenagers. And one of the things I struggled with was self-confidence and self-love, even when those around you who should love you unconditionally maybe don't. And so one of the transformations Razmira has to go through is being like, okay, even though I have these talents and all these people tell me I'm good at things and all that, it's okay for me to love myself for whatever I want. I don't have to love myself because I'm talented at this. I don't have to love myself because everyone tells me I'm this way. I can just love myself for who I am and be who I am, and that's okay. And so that's something that I like to explore.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about writing process. I've noticed that writers are all different. They all approach like writing a book in different ways, and it's hard to tackle a book. At least I always find it very difficult. When I was first writing, I thought, okay, once I get this down, once I write a book, I'll be good, and I will have learned that. And I have found that with every book, it's kind of like starting again. and I'm learning new things. So what was your writing process with these books, and what's something you learned along the way? Do you want to go first?
Sure. This one was a struggle. It's my third published book, my 6th overall book that I've ever written. But like you were saying, something that I had to learn is that you write every book for the first time. Like, you learn how to write all over again with each new book you write, because you have to learn how to tackle something new. But my process is just that I set a daily goal. So for me, it's usually somewhere between writing 1,000 and 3,000 words a day. Actually 1,000 and 2,000 words a day. And I just have to hit that daily goal. And I'm not allowed to do anything fun until I hit that daily goal. I'm allowed to eat, but then I have to hit the daily goal. Nothing else is allowed.
Do you hit it though? Like, do you actually? Because I will set a goal and I'll be like, yeah, 1,000 words a day, and then 5 days later I'm like, oh, I owe it 5,000 words. Like, I haven't written anything.
You can then go and write 5,000 words in one day. I cannot do that. I have to do the little goals, otherwise it doesn't get done. So you do it? So I do it, yeah, I do it.
Gosh, Tricia.
And if I do skip a day, then I have to double it the next day. So I'm very motivated not to skip a day, because I'm so bad at doubling that. I lose focus, and my eyes start to hurt if I'm staring at a screen for too long. I had to get a prescription for special glasses, so I really have to break it up and then meet that goal every day. But when you meet a daily goal every day, eventually you end up with a book. And sometimes I get stuck, and so the daily goal is, okay, today I'm going to plot out this scene, and I'm going to figure out exactly how it's going to go. So it's not necessarily meeting a word count, but it's figuring out the problem, right? So sometimes I adjust my daily goals, but as long as I'm always meeting those goals, I feel accomplished every day. Whereas if I don't break it down like that, then it's like I only feel accomplished once the book's done. And if you do that, it's a long time before there's any sort of gratification from your work. So that's how I tackle it. What about you, Caitlin?
For me, because I have 4 very small children, I have to be very, very scheduled in the way that I write. I have working hours, and that's all I get, because if I don't meet my goals, then my kids will still be there in the morning, and I have to run around after them. So when I wrote my first book, Last Upbringing over there, and that's actually the first book I ever wrote, so
Wow.
I discovery wrote it, which I'm never doing that again, guys, because it's really hard to go back and actually make a cohesive story about it. That's different for everybody. Some people love discovery writing, and they make it, they feel like their characters mesh better, and I don't know, you can go back and reverse plot things, so it works out. But for me, I need a better trajectory than that. So for me, I usually have like maybe 2 hours every night that I write. I don't have a word count goal, but I usually write about 2,000 words in 2 hours. And
That's impressive.
I have to write very fast, because otherwise my children will catch me.
You're like out racing.
I know. Sometimes it's like that. But yeah, that's how I usually approach it. Now I have like extensive outlines that I don't usually follow. As long as I have a trajectory, it's good, and then I just do whatever I want when I'm actually writing. But yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah, it keeps you in a general direction. Mm-hmm. I do like the opposite of Tricia, where I spend months
You set a goal and try not to hit it?
Yes, I spend months, I don't do anything, and I think to myself, I'm going to set a goal, and then I don't. But what I actually am doing is I'm spending that time just thinking about the book, and sometimes I'll jot down notes, or I think I might want to do this or this, and I start to kind of form this world. I draw a lot of inspiration from Pinterest, because I'm really visually minded. I was a photographer for a long time, so... but then what happens is I approach the deadline and I'm not done, so then I try to cram and write the whole book in a short period of time. So that's
nice.
Not very effective, and I can suggest not
doesn't recommend that.
Not doing that. Okay, so one thing that I always have to have with me when I'm writing, like I have some certain things. I used to have a pair of sweatpants that I would always have to wear, but they are very old now and they have lots of holes in them. So I've tried breaking that habit, but other habits that I have are I have to always have a Coke Zero, and it has to be a certain temperature. It needs to be pretty cold, and I always have to have hot tamales. And once I have them, even if I don't even eat them, they need to be near me, then I'm ready to start writing. Those are kind of my writing warm-up. Do you have any writing necessities before you begin?
I don't have to have it, but on cold days, I do love to drink Bengal spiced tea, and on hot days, I do like cherry Coke. But sometimes it's better to not have anything to like pause and grab, because they'll be like, oh, this scene's so hard. I'll just conveniently take a drink now and like not work on it for a few seconds. So yeah.
For me, I've spent so many years just like, I have 5 minutes, okay, I'm gonna write something that I can literally drop everything. I remember once my mother-in-law came over to help me with something, and she's like, oh, I'll watch the kids for a little bit. And I was literally in the middle of sweeping a floor, and I was like, okay, and left, and didn't finish. So, like,
Thank you.
yeah, I can drop everything, and I don't need anything, and just do it.
That actually is really handy. I'm a little bit neurotic when it comes to, I have to vacuum the house first before I write. And I don't know why. Okay, so
It's true. I'll be there and I'll be like, Erin, we need to write. She'll be like, no, I have to finish vacuuming the floor first.
Trisha, I'll say we're gonna write this time. Trisha will come over and I'm like, I'm not done yet. I'm vacuuming. And I think what it does is it puts my house in a sense of order. You know, like I feel like, I don't know if it's like the energy is then right for the writing.
Yeah.
So what do you do then when, do you get stuck? Because I know you said you kind of outline a little. I'm a little bit of a discovery writer, a little bit of an outliner. So what do you do when you get stuck or you're not quite sure if you like where the story's going? Because what I do is I get up and vacuum. And this is legit a true thing. I get up and vacuum, and I think vacuuming helps me think, or I go on a walk.
For me, a lot of times if I'm stuck, I keep writing, and then the next day it doesn't seem as bad as I thought it was. But another thing, like if I just can't figure out a plot point or whatever, I'll go for a run, and I have like really loud music and drowns everything else out. I probably am not enjoying outside as much as I should when I'm doing that. But I usually think it through while I'm running, or I'll just sit someone down and say, I need to talk to you about my plot point. I don't want you to talk, I just am going to talk. I don't need help, I just want you to listen to me. And then usually it unknots itself as I'm talking about.
I have to get away from my computer and go and get a notebook and sit in front of that. I've heard it said that you use a different part of your brain when looking up versus looking down. So if it's not working while I'm looking up, I go and I grab a notebook and I stare at paper and I write with a pen.
When you're using your
And
hands,
that,
too.
yeah, and when you're using your hands, you use a different part of your brain. So it's like switching over, and I go into like figure out mode versus write mode, and it really does help to just do that.
That is really smart. I like that.
Thank you.
I listened to a lecture by Ann Na recently, and she was saying that music really helps her to write. And so she will listen to different types of music depending on the scene, because it will inspire kind of either the flow of the story. And so I have taken to listening to, I grew up playing the violin, and so I listen to a lot of classical music. Do you have a type of music that
You
you
played the violin? Why
You
didn't
did?
tell me
I
this?
have told you that. Anyhow, so I listen to classical. That's what I listen to when I'm writing. What do you?
I don't listen
Do you
to
listen to
music.
anything?
It's
or
distracting.
I can't listen to music while I'm writing, but I brainstorm when I'm running, so it's like running music. I don't know.
Running music.
Upbeat music I wouldn't normally listen to, actually.
So you need total quiet when you're writing?
I don't need total quiet, but when, I can't process more than one thing. Like if there's music on and the TV on at the same time, my brain like explodes, and so I can't focus on writing and then also have music going.
Okay, let's jump back to our books for a little bit. So tell me about, is there a character in your book that was inspired by anyone, or is there a character that kind of you relate to more?
I relate to my main character a little bit. She grew up in a place where people told her exactly what to do and how and what kind of person she was. And she's very passive at the beginning. She's like, I have all these questions, and if she asks one and someone says, oh, this is how it is, she's like, oh, that's how it is, okay. And then as she progresses through the book, she learns how to be more assertive and learns how to like analyze information a little bit better and to ask the questions that she's scared to ask. And I feel like when I was younger, I was super passive, and I was just like, I'm just gonna survive and keep my head down. And then being able to take a character and make her brave and make her overcome that was something that was really fun for me.
That's really cool. I think all my characters are a little bit of me. I already talked.
Cool.
I already talked about my main character and how I created her, but so there's 3 characters stuck alone in the wild together in the monster-filled wilderness, and they have to complete these impossible quests if they want to go home, right? And so I've got Resmira, who's my docile little Hufflepuff, who's just like a little piece of me. And then I've got this guy Soren, who just wants to like fix everything and help everyone. And he's like going around like trying to take care of everyone, to the point where he drives the main character nuts and is like, leave me alone, I want to do this on my own, that's how it's supposed to work, right? And then I've got Eirik, who's this Mr. Sassy Pants, who's just there to like crack jokes. And those are all little pieces of me and what I like to do. I like to help people, I like to be sassy, and sometimes I'm a docile Hufflepuff, but mostly I'm a Slytherin.
I was like, I've never seen the docile Hufflepuff.
Not around you, Erin. I'm a Slitherpuff.
But I've seen the sassy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know, when I wrote, people all the time would ask me with the other books, Ever the Hunted, if Britta was like similar to me, and I was like, not at all, because Britta in my mind is very quiet and kind of introverted, and I'm the opposite. So it was easier for me to write Lyra because she's, I would consider, extroverted, and one of the things that's really important to her is family. So my dad is, we're from Hawaii, and when he joined the Air Force, then we moved around a lot. But Hawaii's always been, our family's been very important to us, and so I wanted that to be a theme in Once a King. So her, I would say her relationships with her siblings and with her parents are really important. And I think after writing the book, I realized that probably came from me, because that's how I feel. So now that you've finished this one, like you talked a little bit about what you have coming up next.
I mentioned I had something coming up next.
Let's talk a little bit. I just mentioned Hawaii. I'm working on a fantasy that is inspired by Hawaii in the colonization period. So that's what I'm working on right now. What are you guys working on?
My next book, I like to call it a Slytherin romance. And it's about this girl who's the ignored second daughter of a nobleman, and she has a plan to obtain power for herself. She's going to woo the king over all the land, she's going to marry the king, and then she's going to kill the king and take everything he has for herself.
Sounds so good.
Love is in the air.
That's amazing.
So my next book is going to be the third one in this series, but since their series and I'm like a plot twist fiend, I can't actually tell you anything about this book or the next one. So like down to the characters that are in it. But my next project after that is hopefully going to be a fantasy heist about a girl whose brother is killed when she's young, and she's out hunting his killer. And in order to keep like food on her table, she steals things for people. And as she steals things for people, she uses that to like look around and find clues for this guy. And then one day she is given this job that's way too big for her. She doesn't want to do it. And then she finds out that it's actually stealing from the man she's been looking for this whole time.
Sounds so good. That sounds amazing. Okay, we were actually, earlier today, we were talking about a possible title for Caitlin.
Yeah.
So, who came up with your title, or how did you come up with your title? What was the process of coming up with your title? Mine usually comes from, and I don't know why, but when I'm writing, there'll be a conversation I write. It almost always comes from dialogue, and I don't intentionally do that. It just, one character says something, and I think, oh, that's a good title. So that's how we came up with Once a King. What about you guys?
For Daughter of the Pirate King and Daughter of the Siren Queen, those are actually my titles. I also have to finish the book first, but basically I thought the pirate princess sounded stupid, so I just rearranged it. For this one, I actually wanted to call it Tasked with Killing a God, and my editor and agent were like, no, that's way too wordy. And then my agent said, how about Warrior of the Wild? And I was like, all right. It's not as cool as my title, but whatever. We'll do it. No, I actually love this title. I think it's really good, and I think it looks so beautiful with this cover.
So all three in this series, each book features a Chinese legend that is told by one of the characters. He tells the story in every single one, and then the name comes from that one. In the first book, it's about Miao Long, and I forget what the name of the other guy is. I wrote this book. I remember everything.
You wrote this book years ago.
I know,
you don't remember anything.
Anyway, it's the name of one of the stars in the sky that there's metaphors through the whole book. And then this one is about an archer who shoots down 9 suns and leaves just one. And then the last one's called Dead Moon Rising, about a girl who goes and lives on the moon. But they're all traditional Chinese legends that are real.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
I have an Instagram account because I love reading books, and so I'm always talking about other people's books. But one of the people will send me questions a lot about writing, and so one of the questions that I get all the time, it's a really common question, is how do you pick the names of the characters in your book? Which I think is really interesting that people find that interesting. So how do you pick the names? So what I do is my own name has like personal meaning. My parents always picked names that meant something, and so every character I chose, I picked a name that the meaning of the name kind of fits their personality or the struggle that they face in the book. So that's how, and I usually go to like some sort of name finder or baby name site. That's how I find them.
Right.
I don't know. I just come up with them a lot of times. I mean, I was restricted in these ones to Chinese names, which...
Do you use real ones, or do you make them up?
No. You can't make up Chinese names.
Well, you can play around with the phonetics.
I'm not confident enough in my
okay.
Chinese to do that. I'm afraid. Like, my little sisters that I mentioned, they do read them, and they already make fun of my Chinese enough without having to add. I accidentally named somebody like Pineapple. I'm not going to do that. So... all of the names, I mean, some of the two main characters have more westernized names because my editor and agent were like, we can't name everybody like Shofei because everybody will get mad or have a harder time reading it, which I actually don't agree with because there are so many great books out now where editors allowed their authors to use traditional names and everybody's fine with it. Guess what? But so in these books, the two main characters have nicknames that are more Western sounding.
For my first two books, I did like straight up made up fantasy names, but I usually do that by taking regular names and just putting a twist on them. My sister's name is Elisa, and I just took out the I and put in an O, and that's how I got Elosa for Daughter of the Pirate King. For this one, I actually, so this is my Viking-inspired, very loosely inspired novel, so I actually used Old Norse names. I looked them up and found ones that I thought sounded cool. And then I did play around with the language and made up some of my own, so hopefully I didn't offend anyone.
It's not a spoken language anymore.
That's okay.
Then it'll just be scholars that are angry at you.
Oh, okay. Well, who cares about them?
That's awesome. Okay, so let's just go with writing advice. Because let's go back to writing. What advice do you have for writers out there in the room? And then this will be my last question. And then if you guys have questions, you can let us know.
Okay. I get asked a lot, where do your ideas come from? How do you come up with ideas? So I will target my writing advice toward idea inception. So I like to tell how I came up with this book idea because I think it's kind of fun. I just finished Daughter of the Siren Queen, and I was suffering from something I like to call swashbuckling fatigue. I had written so many sword fights in that book. It's just everybody's fighting each other with their cutlasses. And I got finished with that, and my publisher had branded me the action-adventure author. So I'm like, all right, I got to write another action-adventure, but I don't want any sword fights. So what can I do that'll be different? And then Gimli came into my mind holding his big battle axe. And I thought, oh my gosh, battle axe battles, that's where it's at. That would be so much fun. So it initially came from me being like, I want to do something different, right? And then I thought, okay, but battle axes are super impractical. They're hecka heavy. They're so hard to swing. They're hard to aim. You have to lug them around everywhere, and they're slow, and why the heck would anybody choose to use a battle axe when they could use a sword? So then I was like, crap, okay, I have to make this make sense. So then I basically came up with the world from this idea of how to make a battle axe work. So I came up with these, this is also my monster book, right? I came up with these monsters that have these really thick, tough exoskeletons, and the only way you can kill them is to swing a big, heavy axe and chop off their heads, right? Then I created like even the plants and the vegetation, they all have really tough husks and skins and bark and everything else, and the only way to get through it, to get to the meat or to get to the firewood or anything, is by swinging an axe to cut it open. So I built the entire world around my desire to use battle axes, and went from there. So idea inception comes from asking yourself questions to make things work in a world. You start with a concept that you really like, and you ask yourself, how can I make it cooler? How can I make this work? And you play around with it, and you tweak it, and you add it to other fun concepts and ideas that you have, and that's how you roll something into a story. So that's my advice for writers looking for help with coming up with ideas.
My advice for aspiring writers is to read widely and to practice writing. because I feel like I hear it all the time, especially with high school students, that they're like, either I'm really good at writing or I can't. And I feel like both are really dangerous because I really like writing and I think that I've gotten better, but I still have a lot of growing to go. And like I love listening to other people talk about how to write better. And so practicing is really, really important. So don't feel scared to start. Just sit down and start writing, even if it's not a story at first. And then as far as, I was going to say something else, and now it's not in my brain anymore, so it must not have been important. Yeah, so read widely and start practicing now.
Okay, and my advice, I think goes along with what Tricia said, because I was thinking recently about world building and character development, and how characters, or just people in general, are like we're a product of the relationships that we have with other people. That's how they shape us, and that's how our personalities and our views develop on the world. And so your character should be reflected by all the other characters around them, and even the world around them, because the world also affects a person. And so I think I always try to find a sort of cohesiveness between the world and the people in the world, and how they've been affected by the world, which goes along with like keep asking these questions, but then also show it in that whole world. So that's my advice, is to search for that, and maybe look at yourself and see how your life has been developed by the people around you. All right, so those are our questions for our little panel, and then if you guys have any questions now, we will take them or we will stare at you. Either way, like this.
Tricia, this is the kind of thing that makes me crazy. Why is it AX and not AXE?
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, why is it?
So I find that, I don't know if this is true, but a lot of it is like British spelling versus American spelling, which is why we get things like travel with one L versus two L's, and like other things like that. What's that?
If it's got an ing after it.
Yeah, if it's got an ing. You know what I meant, traveling. Anyway,
With a U.
yeah, so I just liked doing it without an E, because I thought, how many times am I going to type the word axe, and it'll be so much faster if I don't have to do that extra E every time. So there you go. I'm lazy.
She's concise.
I am. We talk about how I'm the concise.
She's going to
reader.
use her time wisely.
I am.
Not you.
I'm not going to put that E in all the time. It works both ways. It's like aid with an E and aid without an E. Like, just do it without the E. Yeah, AID versus AIDE. They're all just, it's the same word, means the same thing. There's just some with and some without. I don't know.
Isn't there like a style guide that you probably have to
I've never been asked that before. Now I'm going to look it up and have an actual answer for you next time. You know what? I actually got to make my style guide for my book.
I mean, for like English language, so like Chicago style guide, it
Well,
has to be
yeah.
like this. I remember once, sorry, this is a random aside. That's, okay. That's probably not helpful. There was a girl in our debut group who, her copy editor, because of a style guide, changed all instances of the word underwear to underpants.
Yes!
Really? She had to go through and fix all of them because the style guide said it had to be
But
that way.
how many times do you type that word?
I don't know. It was a
Like,
contemporary
what was she
romance.
writing? A contemporary romance? Had
get
that many use? It must have been really
Exciting. Well, I was
exciting.
just
Really
imagining
romantic.
And he
all
took off his
instances.
underpants.
Yeah, no, like in all instances of
Oh man!
underpants. I don't know what style guide that was.
Thank you for that question. I
That
love
was
that
it. That was
question. That was a great
Who
question.
uses that word anymore? Okay, was there another question?
Since writing can frequently be like a solitary activity, how have you guys been able to find community and with
good
other
question.
authors, and maybe that's like a critique partner, like a writing group, or I don't know.
That's a fantastic question, because
Yeah.
I'm very extroverted, and so it's actually difficult for me to sit alone and write a book for a long period of time. So I've met all of my writing friends or people that at writing conferences. So when I moved from Hawaii to Utah, there was a very big writing community there, and that was great. So I would go to writing conferences and meet them there, which then we would talk about writing things, and we became friends. And then one thing that I'll do is I will call someone up like Tricia, and I'll say, hey, you want to come over and write? And then we will sit on my couch together and just write. And then every now and then I'll take a break and talk, and then go back to writing. So that really helps me, because I like hearing the sound of someone else typing, and then I like to have someone to talk to.
I actually think it's really important to have a writing group or writing critique partners and stuff, not just because you need it and all of us need it, but because of that social stuff. When I first started writing, I lived up in like a very remote area of Montana, and like I didn't even have neighbors, much less writing friends, and so I felt really super isolated. And so I started going online and meeting people that are in the writing community online, and there are tons on like Instagram and Twitter can be a little bit dicey sometimes because everybody's arguing about stuff all the time. But there are tons of people who are looking for people to write with too. I actually have a podcast where on our website we do first chapter critiques for aspiring authors, but part of the website there's a place where you can look for critique partners online.
Have you ever done NaNoWriMo?
I have tried.
Well, on the website, you can find other writers in your area and you can connect with them. So use that as a tool to meet other people if you're looking for more people.
And they have nano meetups.
Yeah.
During NaNoWriMo, so you could meet up with other people.
Yes.
And then they're all sitting together.
Yeah,
Which is my jam. I love
See,
that.
I can't write like that. I honestly can't. Like if I go, I'm being social.
You're not doing it.
I'm not doing it to get stuff done, but I do it though because I like them. Sitting by them while they write.
Set limits.
I know.
Oh no, we do. I do get
45
stuff done.
minutes on, 15 minutes off.
I'm much more of a sit down and write straight for 2 hours without any. Yeah. And so when I get in trouble, but I know when I'm going to one of these writing things that's how it's going to be, so it's fine.
Okay. Was there any other
questions?
If not, we'll get to the signing. We're good. All right. Well, thanks you guys for coming out. It was nice to. I'm just gonna clap for you.